The return to work has kickstarted, and leaders are focusing on creating newer and better experiences for their workforce. With the onset of this journey, employee experience metrics will focus on a lot of critical factors like employee well-being, culture, organizational learning, and DEI. Join this illustrious conversation as people leaders from across industry come together to devise a roadmap to creating an EX quotient that stands out in hybrid workplaces. To delve more into the context, we have a CHRO power panel on from remote to engaged, rethinking employee experience, well-being, and corporate culture for work's hybrid and digital future. Joining us for this insightful discussion are Rajendra Mehta, President and Group CHRO, Wellspun Group, Prajakta Kanaglekar, Senior Director, Organization and Talent Development Leader, Flipkart, Seema Unni, Head HR, Fidelity Investments, Ruchira Bharadwaja, Chief Human Resources Officer, Kotak Life, Niharika Mohan Vohra, CHRO, Luminous Power Technologies. I would also like to invite Ayaskant Sarangi, CHRO, Wipro Enterprises, to moderate the discussion. Also, for our audience in this session, we have the best question reward. So please keep sharing your questions for our speakers and get the chance to win Amazon vouchers. Also, do not forget that the Sprint and Spride activity goes live for the third and the final question at the end of this session. You will see a pop-up question on your screen. Type your answer at the earliest to win a jackpot prize. The seat for the third champion is a skill vacant. Over to you, Ayaskant.
Hi, everyone. Last 2 years have been truly humbling for all of us. The way we worked has got completely disrupted. Safety and employee well-being became a core part of every corporate's work environment. But things are reopening thanks to vaccination in this country. Thanks to the way steps have been taken by the government to open up its work and the overall ecosystem. All of us are kind of getting into an environment where gradually we'll have employees come back to work in some shape or form, right? But having said that, it's a change. It's a change for all of us because the way we worked has changed for the good or the better. Will something that we will discover over a period of time. But definitely areas like employee experience, well-being, corporate culture, these are things that would require significant amount of rebaselining from a future perspective. What we'll try and do over the next 40 minutes is to get some great thoughts from my co-panelists on their ideas and views on some of these areas and how are they preparing their respective organizations to manage in this new hybrid model. So with that, without much ado, let me begin my set of questions for everyone. My first question will be a common question for all the panelists. And so before we prepare anything for the future, I thought it's important that we step back and look at what did we learn from the past. So my first question is for you, Prajakta. What has been your biggest personal learning during the crisis?
Thanks, Ayashkant, and excited to be here. And as I reflected on this question, I think, these have been, the last couple of years have probably been the toughest years that at least I have seen in my lifetime. And I'm constantly amazed by the ability of all of us around to adapt, to be resilient, and to hope. So for me personally, if you ask, the biggest learning has been about always keeping relationships first, whether it is family, friends, or colleagues, because your life's regrets will never be linked to a project you couldn't complete on time. And there was one saying I stumbled upon, so I'll leave you with that very recently, which I really loved, which was from Nelson Mandela. It says, "The greatest glory in living lies not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall." So those are my learnings, Ayashkant.
Lovely, lovely. Great quote, Prajakta, as usual. Thank you. Seema, over to you. The same question.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ayashkant. I'm really happy to be here to share experiences and reflect on the last couple of years. I think for me, the greatest learning has been, how can I be more and more nimble with compassion. And you know, both those are fairly different skill sets, but you needed to combine them in this environment over the last couple of years. And I would say that has really been my biggest reflection. And so in many ways, Prajakta shared that lovely quote. I have a quote which says, the world is the clin and we are the clay. I almost felt completely molded in the last 2 years, just in terms of, my own orientation and thinking.
Lovely, lovely, Seema. Ruchira, your thoughts, please.
Right, Ashkan. So actually the things that I wanted to talk about have already been spoken. But there has been another one which has really added to my repertoire of learning, so to say, and which is saying how resource constraints no longer is a liability, but it is an opportunity. Without sacrificing quality, how can we make a start and smart, sensible choices we can make? It's about really doing better with less. So the mantra no longer remains do more with less, but how do we do better with less? There has been another realization, and I'm taking the opportunity to also say that this learning was actually not to accept limits, both at a personal and professional levels. I've realized that goals can be achieved through alternative thinking, and rethinking. So that's what it is.
Wonderful, Ruchira. Loved your thought on not having limits. Niharika, your thoughts.
Thanks, and lovely to hear from the co-panelists. Learnings have pretty much been similar, but I think 2, 3 things which really stand apart. One is just the power of the human race. I think the way everyone came together in this time of crisis and galvanized together was phenomenal. You saw help coming from places where you didn't know they existed. I think that was one of the biggest things, that together as humans, we can achieve so much more. One. Second is the power to just adapt and be agile. If we look at our own lives, if we look at the business scenario, the way the business is transformed so quickly with this crisis was phenomenal. So for me, that was another big learning, that we can keep talking about change, transformations, but here we had a problem, and the way we all changed it was phenomenal. So that was another big learning. And I think third, more on a personal side, was the reflection of what really matters to us in our lives, be it our friend circle, be it what we want to do in our lives. I think it was a big reflection point for all of us, and we all took a pause, and we got our priorities right. So I think 3 big things for me that this pandemic got.
Lovely, lovely, Niharika. Rajendra, last but not the least, your thoughts, please.
Yeah, so great to hear the panelists around. I joined this organization at the thick of the COVID, which was May 2020. And I think, what mattered most at that point in time was that how do you really take care of your people, community around, give them assurances, have enough and more, empathy with people around. That pays back, well to the organization, the business aspirations. And agility, as others have spoken about. I think we did well because of a couple of these elements. And we grew in the thick of these, COVID phase. We grew enormously. What binds people together is the relationship and the care that you can give. I think there are a couple of learnings that I've had through this phase.
Lovely. I think some great insights, both in terms of personalization, right? Relationships, agility. I think those were adaptability. Those were, I thought were very, very powerfully put by all of you. So let's now kind of fast forward and come to 2021, right? November 21 now. So let me again begin with you, Prajakta. What are the 2 or 3 key shifts you have seen in employees' expectations? Purely from a work perspective, is it what we had in March 2020 and what we have now?
Yeah, I think 2 that I can talk about right off the bat. And the pandemic has changed the way we think and operate, right? So for most of us, we were compelled to work remotely, and there were several changes in the way day-to-day business functioned. We also had to adapt to a new way of working pretty quickly. So similarly, the employee shifts that I've seen, I'm kind of relating that back to what I've seen within Flipkart and what I've read about in the research. I think the first and foremost, which I think you referred to at the beginning, was safety and well-being. One of the biggest shifts is how employees are expecting their employers to take the lead in managing their safety and well-being, whether it is in the form of benefits, workplace safety, active education on various aspects of well-being, or being empathetic to their evolving needs and having that compassion, right, as well. So as an example, right, when we started seeing this shift in FK, one of the things we did was we conducted like thousands of safety awareness sessions, doctor consultations, especially for our supply chain, curated COVID safety handbook, facilitated vaccinations, a bunch of different things to kind of stay ahead of what our employees were expecting. The second that I can talk to is the work-life balance, integration, whatever you want to call it, because there is a huge amount of industry research as well as our internal surveys that tell us that the pandemic has disproportionately impacted our employees, and especially women as well. Whether it is in the form of removing boundaries completely, right, between work and personal life. There are a few nuances I'll kind of call out on this one as well. One is we now need to ascertain that our employees are connected. It's harder in a virtual environment. So how do you ensure that our employees are not losing sense of belonging, right? And their mental well-being is taken care of as well. We also have had, from an employee perspective, they're also talking about how can you create that work environment, even though it is virtual, that still makes me feel included, right? The inclusivity, the psychological safety with hundreds of new employees joining, as Rajendra was saying himself, completely virtually in an organization. The third thing that within the work-life balance space that is coming up is around focus time, because the number of meetings, the length of the meetings, how much time you're spending in them is actually preventing you from having sometimes focus time to do deep work, right? So that's an ask from our employees as well. And finally, as we look at getting back to office gradually, for Flipkart, for example, hybrid working is going to be the new reality. And how do we enable that flexibility within the framework so that our employees are also able to take care of their personal needs is going to be really, really key to having happy and engaged employees. So those are the two, Ayushkant, if I had to really prioritize from my point of view.
Great, great. And just building on that project, I'll come to you, Seema, right? So because a lot of people would say that, look, we could focus a lot on well-being and safety because there was a need for it. So as we get into future and we get back into the rhythm of quarterly pressures and targets and so on and so forth, how should organizations really prepare to ensure that some of the good things that were done around, especially on well-being, are sustained? Some thoughts on that, please.
Yeah, sure, Ayushkant. And, I'll just say that, again, just based on a lot of interactions with academia, the future of work, as well as the situation that we've gone through in the last 2 years, there are three things that, our value proposition from an employer perspective has to really be focused on. We were very focused on a productivity or a work value proposition. From an industry standpoint, I think that clearly needs to shift to a human-centric value proposition today. And what does that mean? For us, we call ourselves kind of a listening organization today. We do a ton of surveys. We want to do our pulse checks because it's really our employees and our diverse set of employees that are going to tell us how we need to morph our value proposition. So three parts to it. I would say one is this well-being around the social system. And the social experience of our employees as an industry, as a community is going to be really important. We encourage our managers today to say, be the social architects for your employee, not just the work architects. And what does that mean? Lean out a little bit, understand what your employees' kind of motivations are, what their families are looking forward, to. And then, really build connections with your employees. And so that whole social experience is a big part of our value proposition today. The second piece is the work experience. And what we actually see in the work experience is, really focus on radical flexibility. Don't just think about flexibility in terms of the hours of work or the schedules of work, but think about flexibility in terms of how much of autonomy do your employees have to make decisions on their work. And the third piece is the organizational system. This is an important one. And the reason I say that is because to your point, right? You're trying to drive productivity, you're trying to drive metrics, business impact. But are you connecting all of that for an employee to the overall purpose of the organization? So we are doing a lot of work on how do you build the KRA connects to the purpose of the organization, which could be customer experience, which could be social impact, which could be, community compassion. So there are 4 or 5 value statements from a purpose standpoint, but you have to be able to build that connect from KRA to work objectives to purpose. And that straight line, if you're not seeing it today, I think we will fail as organizations. So social, work, as well as the organizational experience, all 3 are really the nodes in that sense of influencing our value proposition as we move forward.
Awesome. Great thoughts, Seema. So over to you, Rajendra, now. During the pandemic, we were forced to kind of put in place multiple initiative practices, right? And some of them could be very relevant for that point of time as well. From your experience, your vantage point, any couple of practices which you think are definitely going to get carried forward from a future perspective?
Yeah, so I think, I believe that practices gets built up, and through the instances that we go through. And my view is that we are also trying multiple things. We are like culture builds up over a period of time. I believe that the practices would mature over a period of time. We are all trying our best to see what fits in well. In the context of Wellspun, I think what we had moved towards, in spite of this industry being a very traditional industry to say this, what we still did is we went ahead with hybrid work culture. We moved the organization from the balance score typical KRA model to more value-based outcomes. And we tried connecting a lot of dots with respect to saying that can we collectively demonstrate a value system which is binding us, all of us together. And therefore, like Seema was talking about, that a purpose typically will play a larger role. Anybody who has had high responsibility as a trait would definitely tend to deliver more than others. So in our whole finding the right fit, these are some of the areas that we are also trying to do a lot of experimentations. And in terms of ensuring that our people remain relevant for future, we have actually gone to the last mile. We are actually training our workers with digital education, making them sure that they remain relevant for future. And a lot of training that we are trying to do while we are doing the Industry 4.0 transformation, we are engaging them thickly on the shop floor to ensure that they are ahead in the game and they remain relevant. And so is our management staff. We have actually run a lot of digital courses for them, so that on how do we move the enterprise from less digital environment earlier to a fully digital environment? How do we ensure that transparency of data remains, that one truth remains true? So how do you connect your customer with the internal system of the organization? And the other thing that we are trying to ensure is that we have spoken about N=1, where customer experiences have been a business process. Can the employee experiences be a business process as well? And can we work on those agendas as much as that we work for customer experiences? These are some of the things that we are trying to do. Probably we hope that this will remain relevant in future as well. So that's where we are.
Lovely, Rajendra. I especially loved the aspect you talked about learning and learnability, which I believe that becomes a very, very critical foundation, more so in this post-pandemic world. Coming to you, Ruchira, since we're talking about skills now, what are 1 or 2 managerial skills that would be required for teams to be led in the future in the hybrid world? Your thoughts?
So the first one is the capability to walk a tightrope between performance deliverables and humane touch. There is a high pressure to accentuate the V curve of recovery on everyone, every organization, and managers are going to play a very key role to see that the performance deliverables are met. Plus, there are, of course, talks about the great resignation. So employees are questioning their being, their purpose in the organization. So this great resignation needs to be converted to a great opportunity by ensuring a very fine balance between what the organization is wanting to achieve in terms of new processes, products, in terms of deliverables, higher level of productivity and such things, but with a huge human touch. So that's one. The second thing I think is having a solution mindset is becoming immensely necessary in today's world. In a marketplace brimming with various products, services, now post-pandemic, even what the customer is looking at, clients are wanting to look at, has to be the product proposition, processes have to be repositioned. So an individual must really carefully weigh the ways and means to address the scenario, about overcoming obstacles, about examining problems afresh, about coming up with newer models for delivery, for excellence, both for the short and the long term. So these are the two things, walking a tightrope between performance deliverable and human touch, and having a solution mindset.
Terrific, Ruchira, and I loved the fact that you stressed on both the short term as well as long term, because I think both are critical to be kept in mind as well. So coming to you, Prajakta again, specific to Flipkart, right? How are you embracing technology to drive employee engagement?
Yeah, so there are a lot of things that we've been deliberating, practicing, experimenting with, right? Because we also know that every employee's experience is unique, and it is determined by multiple factors, whether it is like key points, touch points in their journey around onboarding, interaction with leaders, processes, and the overall work environment as well. So maybe I'll take a few examples of what we've been doing at Flipkart, and hopefully that kind of brings that point to life. So the first step that we took, this was back in May when we were under lockdown, was actually to do a COVID survey. And the learnings from that were so incredible for us that we ensured that we leverage them throughout, right? And it's hard to get the pulse of the organization when everybody is virtual. So it really helped us get a pulse of the organization. So the learning is, in a quick summary, was that our employees trusted our leaders to take the right decisions. They appreciated the communication flow that was keeping them up to date on everything that was going on. They were able to collaborate with their teams really well, even though it was virtual. What they were struggling with was the work-life balance and the org support that they were expecting. And so for us, the steps we took as a result was very clear, right? Whether it is from the policy changes that I had mentioned earlier, including like a completely, unlimited medical leave for our employees, to multiple other steps that we took around sensitization of people managers on how to handle teams in this environment and so on. The second thing that we did was we launched continuous listening in the organization using our own internal chatbot. And we basically tapped into 35 plus employee touchpoints. And this information is available to each and every HR business partner, so that they can actually proactively engage with the employees that need their help. And this is in addition to the listening sessions that right from our CEO, Kalyan, everybody else kind of continues to do through this pandemic. The third one was our entire learning and development was pivoted to virtual. And this is, I'm not even talking about MOOCs or online courses. This is actually in-person courses that we used to do, about 1,000 odd, were kind of completely pivoted. Our entire leadership journey that we had begun for a year was completely pivoted to virtual, right? So that actually was a big shift, and we were really worried about how that would work. What we were really surprised and happy to see was that the feedback did not change. The quality of delivery did not change. So I think that was the third thing. And the last thing I'll leave you with is more of the future piece, which is how do we integrate and democratize that employee experience. So we are looking at an internal talent marketplace at this point in time, which we are planning to bring out around second quarter of next year, which will integrate from an employee aspirations as the first point, projects that they do, mentors they seek, learnings that they can have, roles that they can apply to, all integrated into one place, right? So that it's completely transparent system for our employees when they think about, managing their own careers and aspirations within the organization. So hopefully, Ashkan, that gives you a quick sense. I tried to distill 4 key ones from what we've been doing.
Terrific, terrific. So coming to you and just building on that, Niharika, how do you think team collaboration would need to get enabled in a hybrid world?
Yeah, I think a couple of relevant points that everyone's spoken about, but I'm going to go back to one of the key aspects that Seema had spoken about, which is on the sense of purpose. All right, so it all starts from there. And leave the hybrid workplace aside for a minute. What is it that gets an organization going? I think it's the larger sense of purpose. And if you're able to knit that purpose together very well within the organization, then it's a success. So keeping that aspect in mind, now let's translate this to a hybrid work. The challenge that we would all have is the lack of seeing everyone every day, being able to communicate. So therefore, I think one of the biggest elements for the success is communication. I think that's a big lever. And all of us have learned over the last year and a half how organizations who have really gone down to communicate have succeeded and have managed to handle this pandemic very well, vis-a-vis organizations which were a little shy on it. So I think the sense of collaboration ties first to what is the purpose that you have, what is it each one in the organization needs to contribute towards, and the communication that goes together. So just to share with all of you, in Luminous also, we had similar challenges that all of us had faced. But what we did very well was the communication which happened, from the CEO desk, and I heard Prajakta also talk about it. The communication from the CEO's desk which happened, business leaders really owning it, and then taking it down to the first line managers. So it's not just a communication which stays there, but something which went deep down in the organization for everyone to understand what is the sense of purpose, what is it that we're trying to drive. Because we have to understand, in pandemic, everyone was very insecure. What was going to happen about their fate? What was going to happen to the organization? Sales were not clocking in. So I think that is something that we did very well. And we were able to rally the entire organization behind what we were trying to do. And for us, actually, the pandemic was an opportunity. And we were able to clock more sales than what we could have done earlier. So in a nutshell, the sense of purpose, and then how is it that you really strengthen the communication lever in the organization will test whether you're able to take people together or not. Super.
Fabulous, Niharika. So coming to you, Seema, since we talked about purpose, we talked about leadership, ownership, in a future hybrid world perspective, how do you see us as an organization, or us as an industry for that matter, really looking at the way we build cultures in different organizations? So your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I'd say that I think there are 2 kinds of operating models we could think about, right? One, which is focused on the whole performance aspect, and the second is the health aspect. When you talk about the performance of organizations, one big thing that the financial services as well as the technology industry is undergoing is agile. So the whole agile operating model, when you put that into practice, it actually engenders obviously faster, metric development and, on-the-job performance. But it also establishes what we call radical candor in leadership, right? The concepts of, I think Prajakta talked about it, psychological safety, servant leadership. And these are hard cultural changes to make, because I think as managers and leaders, we have been accustomed to linear ways of thinking across the globe. And this needs a very different kind of thinking where you don't even know the answers. The answers are going to come from elsewhere. So this entire the entire tipping point right now is at the base of the pyramid, which is your employees telling you how we need to ideate and think about things. So the whole concept of agility in an operating model really drives up the performance aspect of the model. The health of the organization, I think, is completely going to be driven by associate well-being. In Fidelity, we've got 3 pillars of our associate well-being that we are driving: the physical part, the financial part, and the emotional part. And there is a lot of advisory mindfulness training that we give to our employees because of this holistic well-being. And so that associate well-being focus is really going to drive the health of the organization. And we actually partner with theater-based companies to talk about happiness, right?
Wow.
So we actually use a learning methodology from theater so that it breaks kind of the monotony of what employees are going through, to say, have a theatrical performance, real-time theater on diversity issues, on happiness, and then test our managers on the happiness index of our employees. We are partnering with a Bay Area company which actually talks about happiness of employees, and each of us is measured on how much happiness we are driving in our employees. And there's literally a happiness index that all people managers across the firm are being measured on. So those are the 2 things I would say from an operating model perspective: agility as well as this associate well-being. But at the center of it, I think that as a leader, I would say that I think it's leadership and managers that need to change. And that's the cultural shift, which is going to be long-winding. It's obviously, like I think Rajendra said, it doesn't happen immediately. You have to have many artifacts in place for a leader and manager to undergo that, mindset as well as a skill set shift.
Super, Seema. So just building on that thought, Rajendra, let me come to you. One of the important aspects of culture is also careers. Right? So how do you think careers will take shape for employees in the future, in a hybrid world environment?
Yeah. So I think, even if you look at Wellspun as a construct, as an organization, traditionally we are serving international markets, large retail formats like Walmart, JCPenney's, etc., etc. We have been in a very traditional model of selling. Today we have an opportunity of going completely e-commerce, completely D2C. So what we're trying to do is to build the core for future, and that core is likely to be the e-commerce bit, which is direct to consumer, because we also want to own up the consumer. So therefore, making, again, like I was talking about, why did we do digital learning for people at the senior management staff and even at the ground level? The intent is that can we move higher growth opportunities to the e-commerce opportunity? Can we own up customers directly rather than looking at a B2B opportunity? And so therefore that's one area that we feel that our continued careers will keep shifting, and we have the intent to move our people into the new roles. Similarly, when we are also a proponent of ESG, which is doing a lot of great work on environment, social, and governance. And on that area, today, if we're looking at traditional industries, we're looking at more from, we never spoke about, carbon zero or, water, management, etc. And looking at the social side and governance side, we are completely pushing ourselves towards the ESG agenda. And therefore, if there is an opportunity for us to look at sustainability as an opportunity, then can we look at circularity as one of the agenda? Because textile otherwise would consume chemicals and other cotton, etc. So can circularity be? So we are doing everything to ensure that we are able to take care of all our stakeholders through all the, and therefore the opportunity of having different set of people, training them to, be relevant with different skill sets. These are some of the opportunities we have done. We have taken our senior management staff through enterprise learning opportunities to think differently and not stay on course with what has been the learning of the past. So we are trying to do shift the mindset towards a new economy, which is possibly likely over a period of time. Can EVVR, the electronic way, or that way, can we move our capabilities, and can we do something largely on the ingredient level, engagement as to what is right for us at the ingredient level in our products. So plethora of things. How do we ensure that our supply chain is far more carbon neutral from the current emissions, to how do we bring them down to? So this gives us opportunity to train our people into a different set of careers, and therefore coaching, reskilling, all of that we constantly do for employees. That's the course I think we are taking, and our talent management program, etc. We are embedding all these opportunities in that framework. So that's where we are. Yeah.
Super. So Ruchira, just building on that, I think we talked about training quite a bit by Rajendra. How would that translate into employee experience, and more importantly, from your org perspective, if you look at Kotak Life, any good insights on a couple of practices you are trying to put in place or already have put in place to drive a better employee experience in a hybrid world?
So Kotak has always been a human-centric organization and has psychological safety at its core. So for us, it is really about continuing that journey in this post-pandemic world. We believe in journey of warm welcome to fond farewell. So for us, it is about an end-to-end employee journey where we leverage principles of customer experience for improving employee experience, so as to attract talent, to boost workforce engagement, productivity, or retention. We actually go beyond words on walls and bring the voice of employees into the workplace by listening and leveraging data very frequently, and to really understand what people desire. And we again go back and check whether they have understood what we are wanting to do, whether their experience is meeting their expectations. So that's part one. So it is about really crafting a workplace experience that authentically reflects our mission, our vision, and the values of the organization. And for that, we keep on creating quite many memorable, meaningful, and purposeful connections. And all that we do in person. And of course, the pandemic has also taught us to use technology in a big way to do it virtually, so that the entire process is extremely seamless. And in turn, we instill also a lot of enthusiasm, if not excitement, for the work at hand for our people. So these frequent check-ins that we do, which is through our HR and PALM. So we have our, every employee in Kotak Life has the entire HR, all the people practices on their mobile. So it's on their mobile device. For example, recently one we did was we wanted to reiterate the values, which are called Pacific. And we did a very simple caselet based quiz for all employees. And within hours, people just go, the moment they open the mobile, that is the first thing that they see, right? So it's a great way of reiterating a lot of things that we cherish in the organization. And we think it's important for having a very psychological safe place for people to come and work. The other thing that we do is we embrace really integrated designs. So that's another thing that is a part and parcel of the way we work in HR in Kotak Life. So whether in parts in space, technology, process, people, whatever it is, how everything should come together for the greater service of the employee and hence the clients and the customers is important for us. Recently, again, one example, again, an anecdotal example that I'm giving you is about, we celebrated 9 routes of women colleagues of our branches, right? And there's an amazing way of retelling the positive stories. And it goes a long way. Such positive stories really go a long way to create a very compelling employee experience journey for others, especially the people who are entering the organization for the first time. So that really amalgamates the experience for everybody on a same page, on the same platform. It's also about developing communities off and at work. We see that the workplace delivers to our employees' needs and the connects that we have with our people through, and of course the festivals and such things are different, are ways to celebrate of people coming together. But I think at Kotak Life, we have already found a very meaningful way of using technology to create employee experience end to end, as I mentioned, right from warm welcome to fond farewell. The fond farewells happen very less in Kotak Life, I must also add here. हमारे यहाँ कहते हैं कि लोग आते हैं अपनी मर्जी से कोटक लाइफ में, पर जाते कोटक लाइफ की मर्जी से, और हम जाने नहीं देते हैं लोगों को. So that's what it is, and but there's lots to be done, and the work is on. We are still learning to how to really make it work in the hybrid culture, where some of the team members are working from home and some in person, but we will get there for sure.
Fabulous, Ruchira. And one of the things I'm really enjoying here is just so much of nuggets of information and best practices that is getting put in place by various organizations, and a lot for me to personally learn and kind of try and implement here at Wipro as well. My last question is for you, Niharika. One of the things the pandemic did was it also moved around talent quite a bit. Right? People kind of went back to their respective native places, and we had this work from home for everyone, so it kind of worked perfectly fine. So as we kind of get into a more hybrid model, what do you think is really going to happen to this balance? Would we have people continuing to work from respective places? Would talent move back into metros? Some insights, some thoughts. I know it's a difficult question, but more to kind of pick up your insights on what you think would happen.
Sure. And I'll put a caveat before I answer the question, which is that my answer could be very short-term, for a short-term focus, because one has realized that you really don't know what's coming ahead, right? So I'm going to put that caveat before I answer that question. I think 2-3 things that we need to keep in mind before I answer this question, and my panelists have already spoken about, is that at least, let's say, if I just have to see the crystal ball, I would say at least for 1 year, 1.5 years, hybrid workplace is going to continue. If that is going to continue, and if that has to be success, then the culture that we spoke about earlier, which is the culture of empowerment, culture of working from anywhere as long as you're productive, the culture of trust, transparency, and really, and Ruchika just spoke about the psychological safety. These are the basic tenets which have to be there if hybrid workplace has to succeed. So given this, I think it's going to be a mix. It is going to be a mix. People and employers, and right now if we see, it's the employers market, we're seeing the great resignation happening. So I think people have got used to the flexibility, and I think it's fair because production and productivity really hasn't gone down. So I think it's going to be a mix whereby people will continue to work in their respective location. And from an employer standpoint, it's an opportunity. I think it was out in the papers 2 days back that TCS is thinking of not really getting their workplace back, by 2025, they're cutting it by 25%. So it's an opportunity for the organizations to really look at the infrastructure cost. The other thing is an opportunity to look at the manpower cost, really. Because if you're not having people in the metros, that would also help the organization. So that's one piece. The other thing that we have to also keep in mind is that going forward, the trend is going to be for gig workers. We didn't speak too much about millennials and gig workers, but I think that is going to be the way forward. And that doesn't constitute anyone coming and being stationed in a particular office. That's point number 2. Point number 3, I think it's a great opportunity for us in HR to get the right talent, right? It just opens up the universe for us, right? Because we have actually experienced that working from even Himalayas work, right? It doesn't really matter. So I think it's a great opportunity for us in HR also to get the brightest talent, irrespective of where they're positioned. So therefore, in a nutshell, hybrid is there to continue at least for 1.5 years. We don't necessarily need to have all the people coming back, but we need to continue the experience that we've given them. So the element of care, well-being, trust, empowerment all have to continue. And for organization as well as for employees, it's an opportunity. So that's how I would like to answer your question. I know it's not 100%, but as I said earlier, I don't think anyone can give 100% answer to your question.
Absolutely, Niharika. And I must say that we have to all realize that all of us are facing this crisis like this for the first time.
Right.
None of us have all the absolute perfect responses, and some of the initial things we talked about right at the beginning of the session about adaptability, resilience, learnability, humility. I think as long as we have traits like those in us as individuals or as a function, I'm sure we'll be able to create platforms which get us to, engage with teams, engage with leaders, get our teams to kind of buy to the purpose that we want to kind of set for ourselves and kind of take it forward from there on. With that, thank you so much for your time. I really hope our audience enjoyed this session and everyone is carrying back certain nuggets that you think would be useful for all of you. Thank you once again, panelists, and all the best, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. With that, we have come to the end of the day-long event. Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen, for the closing remarks.